All right, guys, so welcome. It is September the 14th, and we are here talking about American literature. Last week, I sent you a video, and I realized something last week. Basically, I feel like I can probably just provide you with a weekly video. I know it seems as though our attendance is starting to drop off on these weekly Zooms. And then in addition to that, it does look like you guys are doing your homework, and that's good. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and rather than to require you to show up every week on Mondays, I will just from now on send you a Monday video where I give you an idea of what you're supposed to be reading and an idea of what I want as far as your homework goes. And then I will be in my office during the noon hour. So you will have access to me during the noon hour. I will be here if you have questions, if you want to get a hold of me, if you want to talk to me about anything. But I won't require you to show up at noon and all of that. I do want to make sure, though, that you're giving me some really quality discussions in the discussion boards. So I would like to encourage all of you guys to provide your classmates with maybe a little bit more when it comes to the feedback on what each other has to say. So just we really haven't gotten very far into the discussions, but I just want you to essentially just basically do a good job in the discussions, and we should have no problems. Let's go ahead and take a quick look. I'm going to share my screen with you at what we've got going on right now. Last week I did introduce the idea of discussions, and this week you will make some comments on each other's posts. Oh, well, you know what? I was bragging you guys up, and then I only have 3 here. Okay, well, let's see. Well, wouldn't you know it? All right. So anyway, I've got 3 people who posted last week's thing. So make sure if you haven't posted it, go ahead and post it. These are going to be worth a significant portion of your grade from now on. And this is because, hey, you know what? I get it. We're online, and it's not the most conducive environment to having discussions. I get that. But the nice thing about these discussion boards is it gives you some time to really think about making a well-crafted response or a comment for your partners, or not partners, but for your fellow classmates. And so I really want to encourage you to make thoughtful commentary. I'm not requiring you to make a certain X amount of paragraphs as far as your responses go, but I just want a little bit more than just a sentence or two, or the discussion we've had in class. We just didn't really have a whole lot of discussion. So I just want to give you this opportunity. Sometimes it's just easier to type it out. Sometimes whenever we talk in class, we feel like, oh man, I'm going to say something stupid, or as soon as I say something, then the teacher's going to ask me a question, and I'm going to feel like I can't answer it. So I don't want anybody to feel that way. So from now on, each week you'll get a video from me, and I'll show you what we're reading, and I'll give you some commentary about what we're going to be doing that week. I am going to be going over one thing that I guess I dislike a little bit about our textbooks is that they don't really cover what I would consider the dominant philosophy of the time quite as well as I would like them to. So definitely make sure to watch these videos, because what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to give you an idea of what the philosophy of the time is. And then from there, you can do your own research. It's important to understand the dominating conversations of the time when it comes to literature, especially as we go through such a large amount of history in just a semester. So we're going from pre-colonial America to 1860 or 1865 America, pretty much this right around the Civil War. So that's a lot of stuff, and a lot of things happened. A lot of different ideas arose, and dominating philosophies of the time affected how literature works and worked at the time. So I want you to understand these basic concepts. So again, just a little housekeeping, just so you know, from now on, you do not have to show up at noon. You can just get the video that I send out, make sure to watch it at least once, and so that you understand everything I want you to do, because that's where I'm going to give you any additional assignments, any additional information, things that I think will really be helpful for you as you go about writing your responses. And then eventually, whenever we get close, we're getting close. I mean, really, we're already getting close to midterm. This is week 5, you know. In week 8, we'll be doing our midterm exams, and I'll be expecting you to really know these readings well, and because I'll be testing you on these readings, and it's not just going to be multiple choice. There's going to be a lot of essay questions where you're going to need to demonstrate your deeper understanding of these pieces of literature. So don't be afraid to do a little extra research on your own in the attempts to get a better score when it comes to these weekly writings and the discussions that go along with them. What we're doing with the discussion boards, of course, you're going to be discussing, you're going to be making comments on what people said last week about the readings from last week as you read this week's stuff, and add to the discussion boards with your writing from this week. And then that's kind of how we're going to be rolling through the rest of the semester, all the way up until we finally work on getting ready for finals, and we get ready for the final literary essay and the speeches that you guys will be doing. So you're all going to have to do a presentation, whether you like it or not, guys. I gave you the opportunity to do little videos in your writing, and that's fine. But one way or the other, everybody is going to have to do a presentation. That's just part of the class, one of the requirements that you have to fill in order to get through the class. And of course, that'll be near the end of the semester. Probably that we'll be talking more about that. So until then, let's talk a little bit about where we are in the grand scheme of things. We are in a time where there is a dominating philosophy, which is rationalism, also known as the Age of Enlightenment or Enlightenment thinking. Now, I gave you quite a few things to watch, so you should be pretty up to date on the Enlightenment, especially when it comes to week 2, I believe is where I gave you, maybe it was week 1, in the very first week, maybe, where I gave you like a huge amount of history, everything leading up to everything leading up to the Age of Enlightenment. And you've got this video here about Enlightenment and the Age of Reason. And then let's see, I think it was week 3 that we had the videos that were more on. Yeah, okay, so week 3, a lot about the philosophy of the time. And you have to understand that you can never separate the dominant thinkings of the time from the dominant literature of the time. Everything is affected by everything. And one of the things we're going to start talking about the Enlightenment, or in the Enlightenment thinking, rationalism, that sort of thing. And one of the things I do want you to understand, though, is just because there is a dominant force in philosophy at the time does not mean that everything that came before it is thrown out the window. So you already saw, first of all, we're talking about the Age of Enlightenment. Okay, the Enlightenment is in full swing in the first part of our country, especially dominating the founding fathers. When you read Jefferson, basically you're reading one of the poster boys for the Age of Enlightenment. And when we think about the Age of Enlightenment or rationalism, we're thinking about a philosophy that essentially is trying to solve humanity's problems using reason. Okay, so up until this point, if you wanted to go find truth, okay, if you were looking for truth, there were, of course, there was, ages and ages of where truth comes from. But in the dominant society of Europe before the Enlightenment, truth essentially came from a priest. Okay, it came from the Catholic Church, or yeah, we would more or less be the Roman Catholic Church would be kind of like the people that kind of had the truth. And you pretty much just, if you were looking for the truth, you would ask the priest. And this worked for their society for hundreds of years, and it was a dominant part of the society. For many societies were the same way when it comes to where does truth come from. Now, What happened in the Enlightenment is kind of a combination of a few things. There was some people who started reading some of the ancient Greeks where they talked a lot about the value of reason, and that you can arrive at reason through truth. But also, one of the things that happened is the scientific revolution when it comes to learning. We basically had the advent of the scientific method. Okay, so the scientific method was something that kind of exploded, and it was a totally new way of looking at things, and what you can determine that which is true. And so objectivity became a dominant value, something that we see all the way to this day. And it came to be that when it comes to the Age of Enlightenment, and you should write this down, you should try to remember this, because this is going to be something I want to see in your discussion posts and your comments when we're dealing with Enlightenment era authors, especially the ones you've been reading the past couple of weeks. The kind of the dominating opinions of this philosophy is that we should leave behind these old ways of finding truth, which would be superstition, and to a great degree religion, and as far as like anything that is mystical, esoteric, spiritual, things like that, because we can't really necessarily know for a fact that they are true. And it's just as likely that you might have a vision and it'll tell you something that's true as it would tell you something that's not true, or it was just a figment of your imagination, or at this time they didn't fully understand psychology the way we understand it, but essentially the way that we can arrive at a truth that can be relied on is through reason. Okay, it's through objective observation and testing. So when it comes to Enlightenment values, that is essential. Another thing we're looking for in Enlightenment values is the opinion that an individual is very important. Up until this time, a human being as an individual in the Western world, and also in many parts of the world, even to this day, that there really wasn't much of a value on the value of an individual. It was more of like you didn't really necessarily count. You were one of the masses. And what the Enlightenment thinkers really valued was the ability of a human being to become an individual separate from others, and to really follow his or her own desire to be the person that he or she wanted to be. So we have the value of finding truth through rational discussion, through reason, through experimentation, kind of the throwing off of the old religious and superstitious world in favor of that value of reason. We have the value of the individual. And those two you're going to see those just dominant in society ever since the Enlightenment. And that was when it started. And what I want you to do is to think about the readings that we've already read, and think about how those authors are wrestling with these ideas. Now, like I said, just because there is a dominant philosophy doesn't mean that the other philosophies of the past are not still part of the psyche of all of the individuals living in that time. So you'll see a lot of the Enlightenment writers using, calling upon the authority of a deity, right? You'll actually see a lot of that kind of thing, but they always marry it in with some form of, well, it's just natural law, or it is something that is self-explanatory, self-evident, right? Something that it can stand on its own. It doesn't necessarily need a deity or a church or any kind of a religious institution to say, yes, it's true, because you can prove that it's true without a priest or some other, like a religious background, okay? Now, you'll see that the Enlightenment writers, they're not necessarily atheists. Now, Thomas Paine was completely atheist. And so you'll start seeing more of that in writers after the Enlightenment than before the Enlightenment. But you're going to start seeing, especially when it comes to the Enlightenment writers, a different point of view, a point of view of, okay, where does truth come from? And how should we put together our society? And then how can we value the individual as opposed to just the masses? Now, just because these ideas were percolating and they were going all over the world, especially the Western world at this time, it doesn't mean that all of the writers were 100% pure with this philosophy. It just meant that this philosophy was influencing their thinking. And so as we go forward, I would like you to think about how Enlightenment values influenced the authors, all of the authors that come from now on. I want you to think about that. Now, here's the thing. Not only are we going to have the Enlightenment thinking influencing authors that we read later on, we're also going to have other dominant philosophical modes of thinking that are going to also influence these writers. So after the Enlightenment, and what we're going to be getting into some of this week, I'm going to talk about it more on next week's video. But after the Enlightenment, whenever we're saying, okay, we can solve humanity's problems using reason, using the scientific method, avoiding superstition, avoiding the spiritual stuff. We've had so much of it, we got to go to reason. Okay, so there did come a time whenever people started to kind of push back against this idea that of all these Enlightenment values. So you're going to start seeing a pushback. That's what we're going to be talking about next week when we talk about Romanticism. Okay, and then later on we're going to see Transcendentalism, and later, okay, so and it progresses. Okay, eventually we get to like Modernism, Postmodernism. You might have heard of these things, but the thing is, these dominant schools of thinking affect the dominant writers of the time. And so from now on, in all American Literature 1, and for those of you guys, I hope you take me in American Literature 2 so you can see kind of how this plays out. We're always going to be looking at how these authors are being affected by these dominant schools of thinking at the time. Now, again, let's see, I'm sharing my screen with you for a reason, and that is because I want you to look at especially natural law. I want you to think about, okay, you've heard of Descartes, right? Well, maybe revisit some of Descartes, Thomas Hobbes, take a look at some of these things and think about, these are the major, I don't know if we have anybody quite like these philosophers in our modern day when it comes to how thinking dominates writers. We have a lot more voices in the world that we live in today. However, you can see it. I'm sure you can see how one artist or one political figure or how people are influenced by each other. Ideas, they don't just stay in a vacuum. They percolate, they permeate, they go to different places, and you're going to start seeing, oh man, this person, maybe this musician is singing songs that sure do remind me of this book that came out, or this movie that came out, or this other thing that people are talking about. Now, when it comes to the writing that we're reading, especially what we read the past couple of weeks, I want you to really think about this. And here's what, just something I'd encourage you to do. You can even go, I think if you've not really learned much about the Enlightenment, just go to Wikipedia. I'm okay with you learning from Wikipedia. Here's the secret about Wikipedia, okay? It's not that it's a terrible place to learn things. It's that we don't cite from Wikipedia as a source. We don't say, well, I know this is a true thing because Wikipedia says it so. Now, I will say Wikipedia is way more accurate than a lot of people do give it credit for, especially about major issues like the Age of Enlightenment. Okay, so let's see. Age of Enlightenment. Okay, and oh, you're going to start seeing, look at this picture. Oh, great, these guys look kind of familiar. And you're going to start seeing the ways of thinking. So I would encourage you, really get to know what this era of human thinking was. Because I guarantee you guys, it affects the way you think about the world today. This is something when we talk about these dominant schools of thinking, it's not like they just go away. Just think about this. I mean, think about we were talking about the Age of Enlightenment, and how they kind of threw off and they kind of they were looking for truth in other ways but religion. Well, did religion stop happening? No. I mean, there's enormous amount of, most of the people on the planet are still religious, and they still seek truth through religion. But at the same time, you'll see a religious person who is a scientist, right? And these are different schools, different philosophies, and people are always wrestling with these ideas. They're always grappling with how these different philosophies work. And so everything affects everything, and nothing ever really goes away. You're going to see, I mean, you can still see some of the same things. Some of you guys will read ancient literature from around the world, some of the even like super ancient stuff from the Sumerians, and you're going to see that there are ideas that were starting then that still affect us to this day. So having said that, I want you to really take some time to think about the Enlightenment. Think about what I just said, okay? Now, I've only been talking for maybe 20 minutes, maybe 15 minutes about the Enlightenment. And I'm not going into great depth with the Enlightenment. I'm just kind of giving you an idea of what it was. But I would recommend, take a minute. It doesn't go into great depth on Wikipedia, but you're going to get to know some of the big minds, some of the dominant thinkers and scholars during the time of Enlightenment. Let me tell you guys, if you're an English major, you need to know this. This is not optional. So take a minute and learn about these things, about the philosophies that affect the writers that we're reading. And the cool thing is, it's going to help you a lot when it comes to making quality posts, quality paragraphs, when your weekly writings. It's really going to help that, because it gives you something specific you can talk about. You don't just have to talk about what you think it means based off of the life that you live in the year 2020. You can talk about, okay, based off of the philosophy of the time. The dominant philosophy of the time of Jefferson was Enlightenment thinking, natural law, okay? And based off of that, I can see these elements of this philosophy, and I think he was being influenced by this thinker or this particular philosophy. No, you don't have to go read all of these philosophers' works, but you can take a look on Wikipedia and get a basic idea of what they're saying, okay? So all you need to do is really just try to think about these dominant philosophies of the time, and then apply you don't have to read all this the great in depth, but just apply that and say, well, okay, this is what people were thinking about at the time. This was the dominant mode of thinking at the time. Can I see it in the literature? And what in the literature doesn't fit? What doesn't fit with the dominant thinking of the time? First of all, this makes your life a lot easier as an English major, because what you can do is you can focus on these things, right? And this is what we do as English majors, as people in the humanities. We can take a look at literature, and we can take a look at the dominant modes of thinking at the time. We can think about, okay, was this person being influenced? Was this person a contrarian to the dominant modes of thinking at the time? Why? Why do I think that? Okay, so having said that, I want you to take some time this week as you go about making your discussions and making your reply to your classmates, and get the discussions on here, guys. We only have 3. Get them on there. But basically, what I want you to do is use this information as you go about making your replies or making your comments, and you're going to benefit a lot. Also, I do expect you to understand this stuff for the midterm and for the final. And I will expect you guys to understand some of these basic things as we go forward and you get ready to write your final essay. So these are going to be very useful concepts for you to grapple with. And while normally I just point to a part in the book, these books don't necessarily go into great depth as far as what the dominant philosophies of the time were. So you'll need to do a little bit of study on your own to figure that out on your own. Now, having said that, let's get to some assigning. Everybody's like, yay, what do we have to do this week? So here's what you have to do this week. First of all, it's week 5. If you didn't do week 4's homework, do week 4's homework, all right? And then for week 5, you're going to read the basically the introduction. So we're going to be in book 2 now, and I want you to read from page 3 to page 21. This does give you a pretty good overview of kind of the history, kind of what you're going to be, you know, it gives you an idea of what we're going to be getting into, okay? And I want you to read this and really think about it. It gives you some of the history of the time, talks a little bit about some of the dominant thinkings of the time, kind of how people were living at the time. And so take a look at that. That's going to help you understand a lot. The next thing we're going to learn, we're going to read is The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Don't watch the movie. It's seriously, don't watch the movie. I mean, it's not a bad movie, but you're going to need to read The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Now, not only do I want you to read The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, oh, you know what? I think that one is one where I'm going to have to give you the story itself. I'm not sure if it's in. Yeah, it is. Okay, so it's on starts on page 41 in our textbook, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. I would like you to read the introduction to Washington Irving, and I believe that starts on page 25. So read all about Washington Irving on page 25, or it starts on page 25. It goes till page 20, the very top of page 29. And I would like you to read the full story of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Okay, so what I will expect, what I'm going to expect in your writing for next week, since it's only one story, I'm going to expect you to give me a really good summary, okay, a very good summary of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And I want you to think, okay, really try to think about how, I want you to think about, does The Legend of Sleepy Hollow have anything to do with Enlightenment thinking? And if it does, tell me what you think it has to do with Enlightenment thinking. If it doesn't, tell me why you don't think it fits into that philosophy. Tell me what about it you don't think fits Enlightenment thinking. So definitely get into that a little bit. I also want you to, based off of what you read about the time period, I'd also like you to, you know, in your response, to talk a little bit about what you feel like it means. And if you want to be an awesome, super awesome student, go ahead and look up Romanticism as it applies to American literature. We will get into it, and we're going to have some fun. Okay. So next week, I will be giving you a video that you can watch at your leisure. It'll be on Monday. It will probably be before noon on Monday that I send this to you. I do expect you guys to be keeping up with your homework. So for those of you who have not, please, hey, I'm not asking you a lot. Okay, I'm really kind of going easy on you since we're doing this all virtual, but I do expect you to keep up with everything and try to give me some quality stuff so I don't have to do the, you know, the, hey, I'm the teacher and I have to get the ruler out and all that jazz. I don't like doing that. So if you have questions, if there's things that you don't understand, if there's anything that I can help you with, please feel free to email me and I will be happy to help you that way, or we can always do a Zoom, just me and you. And believe me, I am super easy to get along with and nice, and I promise I will do my best to help you. Okay, guys, so that is what we're doing this week. Make sure to read The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Make sure to read all about the period that we're going to be reading. Read the introduction of Washington Irving, and make sure that you're going to your discussion boards and you're not only handing the stuff into me, you're handing it into the discussion board, and then go to week 4 and make a comment on at least 2 people's posts and make it an intelligent comment. And hopefully you'll use some of what you learned today about the Enlightenment and what you're going to learn about the Enlightenment in your responses. Okay. Having said that, I will adjourn class. I really do appreciate you guys being here. If you have any questions, email me. If not, guys, have a great week, and I will look forward to sending you another video next week. Thanks a lot.